The MacBook Air M4 is almost too good to be true. It's faster, it's more efficient, and it's somehow cheaper, which feels illegal for Apple. They perfected this laptop to a point to where it has no competition, and that is where the problem lies. Because when something is already this good, Apple has no reason to change it, like, ever. Since the M1, Apple has turned the MacBook Air into the go-to laptop for almost everyone. And with the M4, it's even better. The 16 gigs of RAM is the standard, it has a new color, which I'll get into later. It has more performance, better battery life, and it's cheaper somehow. But here's the thing, when a product reaches this level of maturity and this level of just greatness, things start to stagnate a little bit. The Air, unlike the Pro, will never get ProMotion. It's never going to get those advanced levels of ports, and it's never going to get another major all-new redesign for a very, very long time. And it's not because Apple can't do it, but it's because they sell MacBook Pros and other MacBooks that cater to more of those types of use cases. They have built the perfect everyday laptop, and that probably means for a very long time, it's as good as it's ever going to get. And that could either be exciting or even a little depressing. So the MacBook Air is pretty much perfected what an everyday laptop should be, but what actually changed this time? The biggest thing Apple pushed here is performance thanks to the new M4 chip in this MacBook. Apple claims the M4 chip delivers up to 50% more CPU performance and up to 4 times more GPU performance than just the MacBook Air M2. Now, while those numbers are kind of insane considering how good the M chips are already, does it actually matter? If you're just browsing, watching YouTube, or writing an essay, the M4 feels literally exactly like the M3, which feels like the M2, which feels like the M1. This MacBook has been fast for years. You're not going to suddenly feel like your Google Docs are flying out of their page towards you. But if you're someone like me who edits, works with larger files, or does more professional use cases, you might notice that discrepancy between older MacBooks and this one, especially if you are coming from an 8GB MacBook Air. For example, exporting a 4K video in Final Cut is around 30% faster than just the M2 MacBook Air. Also, this does have a more beefy neural engine, so if you do any AI stuff, whatever that means, you will notice a difference if your workflow does rely on those types of tasks. Apple keeps pushing Mac gaming, and technically the M4 does help. It has more GPU cores, METALFX upscaling, and technically this should make a pretty substantial difference when it does come to playing games. But let's take a step back and be a little more realistic. The MacBook Air, while it does have 16 gigs of RAM and does have the new M4 chip, is still a MacBook Air, and it is still a completely fanless design, which means that for any intensive games you might play, after a certain amount of time, you're going to be thermal throttling this thing 100%. Now, I've said that you won't feel the M4 chip in regular performance use and in gaming, so what are you actually going to feel the benefits for? A big driver for myself and a lot of people who use MacBook Airs and take it on the go, which is the intended use, is battery life. Now, my M2 and M3 Air in the past has already lasted me well past my expectations of what a laptop should, but the M4 does tout some really great improvements on the battery life piece as well. Apple's new efficiency cores do stretch out the battery life even longer, and if you weren't leaving your charger home already whenever you're going out on your normal day, to be honest, you can probably safely leave that charger at home and just go out with this thing fully charged to get you through a full day. If you want the best battery life out of any thin laptop, outside of maybe Windows' ARM competition, this is the one to get. So yes, it is faster, but unless you're pushing it with creative work or coding, you won't feel a huge difference day to day. It's more of a future-proofing upgrade than something you'll notice immediately. If you're coming from an M1 Air, sure, you'll notice it 100%. If you're coming from like a 2018 Intel MacBook Air, you're gonna be in for a roller coaster. So the MacBook Air M4 is cheaper, it's faster, it's more efficient, but what actually changed physically? Not much. The design, the ports, and the display are basically the same, which isn't a bad thing, but there are a few areas where an upgrade I think would have made a pretty big difference. First, the display. Now, this thing is still locked at 60 Hz, and while I know there's a separation between the MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air for that coveted 120 Hz ProMotion, base laptops nowadays at least have 90 Hz screens across the board. If you haven't experienced a 90 Hz screen, going from 60 to 90 is still a really big deal and does make it feel so much more snappy and smoother to use. Also on the bezels, they're fine. They've been the same, I think, for the past few years or the past few iterations of MacBooks. And while I'd love to see smaller bezels and a more like futuristic premium design like we do see on the MacBook Pros, understandably this is not a Pro and those types of things are just reserved for that higher end MacBook. And then there's the ports, which I'm not a stickler for needing an HDMI port and all these different ports, but at least put a USB-C port on each side, so that way when it comes to being in a coffee shop or needing to charge your MacBook in weird locations, I don't have to like pivot this and angle it in a certain way just to get the charging done if the charger's on the other side of me. And as for the screen itself, obviously it's still great. The MacBook Air does have a pretty good screen, but we're not getting any advanced technologies like OLED or like mini LED or even some great HDR usages. The only real visual change is this sky blue color that I have right here. And as someone who owns sky blue, I really did want to love it. I think it is a pretty cool and different design. But while some reviewers are saying that it's like not blue enough, in sunlight, it does look really silver, but if you're using it in like a darker area, the blue comes on a little too strong for what I want out of a laptop. But that's the thing, Apple does keep this at the edge of being the best thing you could buy to save the rest of their brand, A, but B, to just keep this intentionally limited with things like a 60Hz screen, the same bezels and the same screen technology for years. At this rate, maybe by 2027, we will finally get at least a 90Hz bump on the MacBook Airs. So the MacBook Air is thin, light, portable, which is basically the whole point of this laptop. But how does that actually feel in everyday use? First off, this thing weighs 2.7 pounds. That's honestly nothing. If you're carrying this around all day, it's so light that you'll probably forget it's in your bag. And if you're using the 15-inch version, it's the same story. It's only about a half a pound heavier, but still insanely portable for the screen size. Opening it up on a small table, no problem. Battery life, absolutely ridiculous. Apple says you get up to 18 hours of use, and while that's obviously with ideal conditions, throughout my test the past couple of weeks, using this MacBook without a charger for a prolonged period of time has never made me get that battery level anxiety while using this. And typing on this is exactly what you'd expect. It's comfortable, the trackpad is massive, and macOS is obviously as smooth as ever. The only thing I wish was better, I really want this to have 90 Hz and just make scrolling feel smoother, but there's the MacBook Pro and the separation and blah, blah, blah. So after using the MacBook Air M4, it is exactly what I expected. It's faster, it's more efficient, it has better battery life, and the one thing I didn't expect was it somehow got cheaper. But at the same time, if you're comparing this side by side to the M3 MacBook Air or M2 with 16 gigs of RAM, it is honestly like the same exact MacBook. If you're upgrading from an M1 Air, this is a solid step up at this point. The battery life lasts longer, it's noticeably faster in creative work, and the price drop back to $1,000 base does make this a fairly good deal to buy. You'll actually feel the difference in responsiveness, especially if you do photo editing, video work, or general coding and more intensive use. If you're coming from an Intel MacBook, first of all, how is it in 2018? Second, this is gonna be night and day for you. You should, if you have not upgraded from an Intel MacBook, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, especially if you use your MacBook for a lot of things. Please get to the M series chips. Even if you buy an M1, it is a night and day difference at this point, and you deserve the upgrade. But if you have an M2 Air or an M3 Air, I don't know if it makes sense to justify buying an entirely new MacBook Air just for this iteration. You're getting small speed gains, slightly better efficiency, and that's about it. You'd probably only notice a real difference if you do run heavy workflows, and if you're hoping for a major design refresh, yeah, that's not happening. Apple knows the MacBook Air is too good for its own good, and that makes it a little bit difficult to cram a lot of new and cool things into this that might diminish their returns for their more premium MacBook Pro or other MacBook lineup. So they keep making it just a little bit better every year, but not good enough to where it cripples the MacBook Pro. And that's the thing, Apple has perfected the MacBook Air so well that I think it's a little bit stuck. This is a laptop that's already amazing, and Apple knows that. They'll keep tweaking it, making it faster, making it more efficient, giving it the latest chips, but ultimately, unless something drastic happens, this is what we're gonna be with for the next foreseeable future. I mean, take a look at the iPads. They have been the same for so long, and the iPad base and the iPad Air and even the iPad Pro are intentionally limited in some ways to not cripple Apple's other lineup of products. Because trust me, if they ever gave the MacBook Air ProMotion, better speakers, or more ports, why buy a MacBook Pro? So in a way, the Air has become Apple's most predictable laptop. But that's not necessarily bad. I mean, you just know what you're getting every time you buy a new MacBook Air at this point. At the end of the day, if you want the best everyday laptop with zero compromises on portability or battery life or efficiency, there, I don't think, is a better laptop to get besides this one. If you're coming from an M1 or older, I think you'll love it. But if you're hoping for a big upgrade from anything past the M1, I think you might be better off just holding back a little bit unless you really love the sky blue color. And hopefully, if you do hold off, maybe by the next iteration, we will get to 90 Hz. And if you made it this far in the video, first of all, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Second, if you didn't hit like already, please consider leaving a like on the video as it does greatly benefit the channel, and tell the YouTube gods that this is a video that you did enjoy. And if you want more tech reviews that go past the specs and overview of a laptop, please do consider subscribing, as I'll be making more videos like this one in the future. And if not, no worries. I'll still be here. There's gonna be a new MacBook in 2 years, I'm sure, that's gonna be the same exact thing like this one, but maybe with a new fancy color. So you could stick around for that one.